I always connect with other CEOs, other industry leaders. And every time that I connect with them, I get 10x more energized and more inspired. There is so much value in listening to other CEOs and entrepreneurs.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to Behind the Growth. I'm your host, Mudassar Malik. And today we're celebrating Luca Maraschi, a great friend, ex-colleague, and now co-founder and CEO of Platformatic. Luca, great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, Mudassar.
Awesome. I hope it's not too early in the morning for you.
It's never too early. Business works 24/7.
I love it. I love it. So I think we're going to have a great chat. And you and I, we talked about that we're going to discuss essentially around the backend development and how to remove friction and bring in scalability. But before that, let's dive into your journey. And if you could just walk us through what your career has been like. I know you've been a software engineer, you're a technology leader, and now an entrepreneur. So let us have it all.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I started very young building companies and selling them. And I started this journey of exploring different angles of the software lifecycle and work in gaming industry, then work mostly in enterprise building platforms. And I covered every role from being a software engineer, like you were saying, down to lead large teams and designing large global platforms. Work again in startup as a leader, building platforms. And then that's when we got our relationship closer when I worked at Mobile Live, and I saw different perspective, right, of the life cycle, which is, I think, what led me to my current adventure. But that perspective is extremely important. It gives you the optics and the point of views, and especially working closely with the large customers that Mobile Live has, different realities, different verticals, different people. And that's actually what I think is the greatest inspiration for building my startups. Is it comes all from working with great people and getting inspiration to build hopefully great products.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Inspiration works magic. And so with that, let's jump into it. What really inspired you to start or co-found Platformatic? Any specific challenges? Like I know you said your journey's been very diverse. You geographically, multiple layers of different businesses from large enterprises to startups and everything. So any specific challenges over the years that led you here?
Yeah. So I when I lecture young entrepreneurs, I always say to build a great company, you need to be selfish. That's the only thing that can lead your internal drive to explore different dimensions, different directions. And the inspiration to build Platformatic together with Matteo, I think it's a great story because I started building really large scale platforms after I sold my last company in 2012. And I came to the realization that we were basically thrown into the digital transformation journey, right? On any area. The first platform I built in Amsterdam, together with one of the most phenomenal teams I could have wished for, was literally like building all these foundational pieces and go above and beyond the so-called mad science. Then the world of Node.js was growing insanely into enterprise. I was the first person to put Node in production in the Netherlands, and I saw the realities from the early days of Node. And that's basically when I started getting in touch and meeting Matteo. It was in the backstage of Node Summit 2015 when I went on stage, and that's a very important thing, as a keynote panel. And I was asked, why are you building a framework? And I was put against in front PayPal, that at the time was building a famous framework called Kraken. And my answer became viral. And I said, if you are an enterprise, you need to build your own framework because a framework is a company specific language. And I think in that, there was the whole reality of what we nowadays call digital platforms. That basically all in that simple definition. So Matteo and I then worked together. I joined Nearform, and the inspiration started to come when we were traveling around the world and we saw different customers. And at the end of the first year working in Nearform, we actually were betting on how accurate our deck was without even knowing anything about context of the client, right? It's just that was telling us that everyone was facing the same exact issues over and over again. And when I work at Talos, I was tasked to build a digital platform. And yet again, the same exact problems. Different angles, right? Then startup, and always in touch with Matteo. So this one was like the more environmental reason that we noticed that there were a lot of boring tasks that had to be done every single time. And this one, they have two costs. They have the people cost, that is convincing people on certain decision, because everyone is like a salmon, try to go against the stream. That's the reality, right? Everyone wants to shine in the darkest night. And reference to Batman, that was my nickname. But the other angle is the opportunity cost, because the whole time that we spend in building foundational pieces, we subtract it to the value creation to our customer. And so it's basically an easy equation, right? Then there is the technology reason. Matteo in 2016 started what is today the most popular and blasting framework in Node.js, Fastify. And there are few important points there that I think are extremely relevant. First of all, Fastify was born by a continuous communication and interaction with experts. And at the time, it was myself, Matteo, the creator, but David Mark Clements. So all people that they have been really deep into those problems, especially extremely into Node, but especially the community. So it was born from day one as an open source project. And that gave even this insane amount of signals on how the framework should have developed, should have accomplished certain challenges and new functionalities. I invested in the framework since the beginning, and I believe that that was the technological reason why Platformatic was such an easy choice for myself and Matteo, is because Fastify needed something to boost and to remove all the boring stuff. Fun story, we actually wanted to call, instead of Platformatic, call it the Boring Company. As you well know, unfortunately, somebody had this idea way before us. We couldn't purchase the name of the company. And then the last reason that is way, I think, closer to all of us, is that in order to build evolutionary software, and we use this term when we were together at Mobile Live, you need to have strong foundations. And the reality is, the more you can actually abstract, the more you can actually not really abstract, you can literally provide it to your developers as a given, the faster you can actually accelerate. And so the reason why Platformatic was a natural choice for Matteo and I was combining all these factors and observing how we are in this digital transformation journey, but especially how the sentiment of developer is changing. And so we started Platformatic on a mission of re-enabling creativity, where creativity was a little bit gone. That is the backend development.
Got it. Awesome. I'm also thinking, like, you guys being, and you especially being in the industry and having that inside view has been critical, probably insights to how you guys are building the platform, right? It must have fed, because you got a hands-on experience and the challenges also.
Yeah, it's if you look at basically the industry as a whole, right? That we are commoditizing, we are trying to commoditize as much as possible the low-hanging fruit of all these platforms, right? It becomes always this choice of build versus buy, but unfortunately, it's the dichotomy of buying a product. You cannot buy a platform. I'm very opinionated and strong, and I take all accountability for saying that.
Yeah, like that I've caught my attention. Let's unpack that. What do you mean?
Working in enterprise, and probably you working currently with large customers, there's always at the executive level the question of, shouldn't we buy something? And you have vendors And I call product vendors, right? That they are coming with products that they try to sell platforms. The reality is that selling a product tries to be a platform. It's, to my point of view, a contradiction in terms. And because I give you the example of the bespoke suit, right? You can actually buy an off-rack suit. And many companies that they are extremely popular, they made a fortune out of it, and kudos to them, right? But it always needs to be contextualized, right? Usually you take the one-off rack to a one-off also event or something that is not for a long term. The life cycle of investment of enterprise is very long. I don't want to say that it's as long as investing as buying a diamond that is forever, but almost, right? They nurture their investment like diamonds, right?
Yeah.
And that's extremely important and fundamental piece of this equation. Products, they are cater for an off-shelf experience, right? With a little bit of customization, but you always hit the boundary of what it doesn't really fit you well. Imagine that shoulders that they don't fit well, and so you start moving, right? And you feel uncomfortable, right? The button is not fully aligned. Maybe you change shape of your body and a little bit off. But a bespoke is actually designed around your body shape, which is exponentially more expensive if you look, but it's actually cheaper in the long term because it's catered to your body. The lines are actually following standards, but they are designed around your body shape. And so if you look at that, is basically how a platform should be, right? So there are certain parameters, certain guidelines that you need to follow that they define the general shape. And then you use all these different pieces. And then the bespoke gives you the opportunity to combine what you want, right? And maybe you want to have 3 buttons on your sleeve, 4 buttons, no buttons. It's up to you, right? The pocket up, pocket down, inside the pen. You decided. Lining, that's completely up to you. But that's what creativity is all about. It's about combining the art of making the impossible possible, following predefined shapes that they ensure the outcome of putting all these things together. So back to that, I think a platform, and I go back to what I said in 2015, is assembling different bits and pieces together with the instructions and build whatever fits you the best for your own strategy, right? You and I some time ago talk about the so-called Lego analogy, right? Analogy. So the Lego analogy, I think it's phenomenal, and it fits exactly the story, right? When you go to the Lego store, right, you don't buy the set or the final artifacts like pre-assembled, right? They give you the Lego in a box. But you know that the foundational piece of Lego is a 4x2 block, right? And this 4x2 block, if you look, there's no human that tries to cut it, sew it, because that boundary enables your creativity on building stuff. It's all there. The trick is there. The creativity is in finding the right minimum common denominator constraint that allows your brain to overcome that barrier and build and rethink about status quo, right? If you look cars now with Lego, for example, they have round shapes. They're not actually square shapes because they found a way to combine. They found the right pieces to invent and to create and to add on the basic pieces. And I actually use this analogy with our investors, but I also use it with generally customers, but even with people I advise. And I always say that I made one great investment in terms of tools, and it's this box. I put it up on my desk every single time because I think this box represents exactly what platforms should be.
Love that.
Because you know that you're going to build this pirate ship, right? It's beautiful, right? But as a kid, do you remember, right? You build it and then you find something that you want to change. And I usually use the example that you want to maybe change this front part and put a dragon or put whatever you like, whatever resemble for you, whatever makes you smile, right?
Yeah,
And this
your
is
imagination is your only limitation, really.
100%. And if you think of what the perception is, a lot of people, I love my mother-in-law, and she said, "Oh my God, you are so great in building Lego." I can tell you the secret. I just follow the instructions. Not that but that's how people they perceive it. Is just because that's the genius thing about Lego, for example, right? Is the whole experience, is the whole psychological game around instructions, and people don't feel constrained because you care about the outcome. And so when we were building Platformatic, but not to focus too much on Platformatic, generally on when you build platforms, right? I think the trick is over there. The trick is to give a well-defined instructions that they let perceive a certain degree of creativity within boundaries. And if you take one step back, this is what we normally call architecture, right? Architecture is unfortunately something that people forgot what really is. Architecture are boundaries, are instructions, and as a lawyer, I can say pro forma instruction. Because it's a pro forma, it's just a way that I present you the way you can build something, right? And then you have what I call more rigid instructions. So if you think in Lego terms or any other terms, there are certain pieces that if you don't put it, most likely your car is not gonna come up. And in software, in platforms, there are the so-called non-functional requirements, right? There are constraints related to compliancy, security, and so on and so forth. So that's in a nutshell, more than a nutshell.
No, I like it. I like it. And I think your message is very clear. What you're saying is your message to enterprises is focus on building platforms, not products.
Yeah, there is a journey, right? You used to enable the products that matters to your customers, right? And I think you cannot build a product. You cannot, use a product to build a platform to build another product, right? It's just, I usually use the example of, I love examples, right? I'm very, do you remember when we were working there? I always come up with these analogies that are like, but if you think, and strangely, as you can see, I haven't used my chef or a kitchen analogy yet.
I know. I was like, when is that getting plugged in?
But I keep it for the grand finale or something like that. But if you think when IKEA, another great example, right? So we all know the PAX, the famous closet, right? PAX is a framework because it's 4 sides, 1 back. And you can put inside whatever you want, but you go and take them off the shelf, right? There is one thing in common to build that PAX, that they haven't been able to make it assemblable without tools. Still need a screwdriver and a hammer. Those are tools, right?
Yeah,
They're not
yeah.
products, they're tools.
Yeah,
Because their final state is to be used to achieve another state of the chain, right?
Correct.
So that's basically the life cycle. And sometimes I was just like hearing, and we have, as Platformatic, we have some competitors in the spectrum. I don't like to call them competitors. I just call it different point of views. And then you go into one size fits all problem, right? And it's the Swiss Army knife that you might have a lot of things that they work, but then try to remove one. The knife is going to start to wiggle, right? And then you just have a loose blade. Or the constraints of the limitations of this flexibility are so much deep into the transforming the art of possible to the art of really impossible. So the reality is that you just need to have a very good toolbox, know how to use your tools, and have instructions and follow them, but then leave that space to creativity to add extra off-shelf functionalities that you can combine and then make the closet that really fits your room and your needs. And those are digital platforms. We are trying to be very creative sometimes, but the real creativity is in accepting the simplicity of what it should be and understanding where creativity should be employed. And creativity goes all in real values for enterprises to create customer experience-driven, customer-driven products that they serve their needs more than enablement products that they are just, sometimes they just don't fit.
You mentioned about you like giving examples. So let's ride that wave for a bit and give us an behind the scenes story on any of the examples, like the real time that you've had, where you would actually come across where you need to address scalability and complexities in the enterprise and what you're trying to tackle to your platform also, right? So anything that could people relate to a little more, like something really that has been top of your mind.
Yeah, when I design platforms, there is always this term that comes, scalability. It has to be scalable. And I'm very provocative. So I always, there are two things that I really provoke, real time and scalability. And those
Not
two,
transformation.
transformation, I came to a point to accept that there are so many permutation of interpretation that I can actually accept transformation because I call it evolution. And so I just close my ear and say, okay. But there are two terms that are really triggering my being
Scalability in real time.
yeah, real time, I can clear it right now. So for all the audience, real time doesn't exist and it shouldn't exist in personalization and those kind of things. I'm saying it here. Yeah, shout at me on LinkedIn and Twitter and whatever you want. But the reality is that if you all take time to really think, personalization is always something that can be done after the fact, can always be done on a different scale of time and data. And as a nuclear physicist, I can actually tell you that I understand the concept of time and space because I have been spending years studying it. The only companies that they really need real time are medical company. Like imagine a Holter for understanding heartbeat. By the way, they never analyze data in real time. It's always analyzed post effects. The only one are the machine that they attach when you are in the hospital that are real time because they have a clear need, right, of intervene before
But
something.
don't you think there's also been the infrastructure has been a challenge? Like there's 5G and the cloud and everything, that there's definitely an infrastructure ecosystem needed for that real
No.
time. Latency right now is just not going to be supportive too, right? Or
There are a million of solutions. We those limitations, we actually set them for ourselves just because we are, as humans, always trying to find new things to be the creator and inventor of. But in reality, there are many limitations that can be overcome with even simpler solution. If you think real time and 5G is because we are overloading even our protocols with data that most of the time is like useless, or is that really necessary? And once again, it's because we accept the products as solutions most of the time. Like I said, there are certain things that they require, and that's why I actually say that there are only few really real times company that they operate, and mostly in self-driving car. That's where you need
yeah, you
that
would need it.
real-time data. That's why, for example, if you think of Tesla, it's not a car company. It's a purely AI, big data company and a battery company. Car is just a medium that they use to test those two things combined together. Real-time boundaries are actually something. You actually raise a very interesting point that connects to scalability, and I use it as a segue. G, edge, all those kind of things. They are there just because there is a phenomenal marketing effort. 5G is to my point of view, it's an overused term. It's a great technology. It's a natural evolution of wireless network, and I think is the most interesting. It is literally extremely interesting because now we are going to say, I can actually install intelligent components, functional components inside of an edge, an antenna, right? What kind of gets me is edge computing and edge stuff. And like, okay, cool, good. But the scalability is the other kind of like interesting factor, right? People think about scaling because there is this kind of like need of scaling immense amount of data. But reality is, like in telco, for example, scalability is on the network, right? But if you think the network is a distributed system, so scalability is not really so interesting, is mostly understanding cap theorem and say, can I actually be tolerant, available, and consistent, right? So for example, in network, in 5G, consistency is irrelevant, right? There is way more importance given to high availability, the need of making a phone call, and partition tolerance, right? I need to be able to jump from one antenna to another without losing my connection. That's like the point, right? The consistency is, it's okay. I can drop my call for a second, right? It doesn't need to be 100% reliable. But scalability in terms of users, I think there are many ways that can be achieved, but we are over-indexing on scalability in terms of performance scalability. I think we are in the phase where we need to think about people scalability. How do we scale on internal people? And that's actually the core point of building platforms, right? I build a
Could you
platform
unpack
because
that a little more for me? This point that you made, the people scalability. What do you mean by that?
yeah, nowadays companies are internally distributed system. If you think how they are designed, right? You have teams, you have uh, individual products, you have microservices. We should go back. We should have a podcast episode on microservice. And these one are they are all fictional needs, right? So we said that we needed to break companies to make them more resilient and blah blah blah. Basically, we introduced a distributed system model to organizations, which introduced the complexity of coordination. That's the complexity in a distributed system. Now, the interesting point is that as we modularize all our organization, we need to scale on people, right? So we need now to scale capabilities, requirements, delivery, outcomes, consistency, all across people, because we are growing the number of people and now can work in parallel on delivering the final outcome, the final product to customers. And so what we need is to focus extremely on how we scale that over our people, because that's I think one of the unfair point in modern enterprise is that, like, and I use this example, right? And I'm not trying to self-promote Platformatic, but one of the things that we observe is that you join the company on day one and you're super happy because they tell you have a starter kit. 2-3 weeks pass by and you start seeing a second one popping up. So, okay, there are 2. Then 6 months, there are 10. And this is like your Fibonacci that goes into exponential, right? And then the last day that you leave, that you are dropping from probably 300 repositories in GitHub. And that's your life, is maintaining starter kits. So you are a victim of inception, technology inception, the starter kit inception. And so this is the reverse of scaling on people, right? Because if you want to scale on people, you need to find a way that your developers, they are enabled in building value to the organization more than repetitive tasks. Those one are the things that should be abstracted. And now probably you will say, but for that one we have AI, and then we can enter like a 6 hours conversation on how basically AI is like useless for this kind of. No, if you want the answer, AI is not going to take over humans. So that's something that is on in Asimov. And my when I graduated from MIT in AI, that was part of my thesis was, can AI replace developers? So I actually wrote this dissertation on intelligent compilers. The reality is that we can actually optimize certain paths through AI, but we can't replace it. There is something that AI will not be able to replace. That is all the inherited knowledge. Inherited knowledge is so complex because it's so widely spread and distributed and disconnected that those connections are so difficult to be taken out of data and brains, that until we will not be able to abstract, to dump all brain memory into a consistent data set, a physical data set, it's going to be very hard to achieve. But AI is going to help massively with certain operations. So you see, we also cover AI, so this one is done.
Yeah, no, and just going back onto your point, I think you make a good point, and I think the echo in the market also is that it's not that AI is going to replace you; it's going to replace the people who are not using AI, who don't understand AI, or actually not adopting it just to bring in more efficiency, productivity.
Yeah.
Or so it's about using and leveraging the technology more than fearing it and resisting it.
I mean, that I don't know if you want to take that rabbit hole with me. My point of view is that AI is a very difficult concept to grasp, and now is really overspread in everyone's mind. It's even in the startup ecosystem. If you are building a startup and you're building something with AI or ChatGPT, people are like, I need to have it, right? It's just because it's the form of not knowing what you're really buying and you don't want to miss the opportunity. That's my opinion. There are certain things that we are using in Platformatic, and we made it as a joke, but fundamentally, I told you, we need to be selfish. Like, we use ChatGPT to generate database schemas. It's a task that humans should not take care of. Right?
There you go. That's a great use case. That's an example how to use it.
That's something that, to be honest, is okay. Or, for example, generating release notes. That's another. It's something that nobody wants to do. Then I was chatting with Matteo and I told him, probably in the future, I will want to build something that solves some problems in the testing space. I'm lazy in writing tests, right? So I just need to find somebody else that does it for me, and that's AI. But there are so many kind of like uses that I can think of. But the rabbit hole with AI is always that I think the majority of problems that we attribute as to AI as the best solution, they are basically statistical models. They're nothing so different. You don't need any large learning model to resolve that problem. It's just like purely linear statistical. Sometimes we love to make things way too complicated than what they should be.
Yeah,
That's how we
you can
can't, right?
find more energy and more enthusiasm for complexities rather than solving them. It's
Yeah,
often the
yeah,
case.
yeah. And the same is when you build platform. If you think you saw like many customers, and we don't name them, they and I've been there, right? There are certain things where you say, okay, just you really don't want to see it, and then it's okay. I'm not saying you must see it, but you should consider. And that's basically where enterprise spends so much OpEx in spinning the wheel. But we all have been there, right? And so
Yeah.
we can't actually. I don't want to be an hypocrite and say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," because sometimes you also do it. But the thing is, when you build solutions, right? There is always some sort of goal in removing pieces that we have already built so many times and say why. I give you an example, right? There is so much when we work together. Still, it was a topic around microservices,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Big one.
We should stop with that. Like we should stop. Everyone lied to us. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Was a lie. Let's live with it. But let's not try to reinvent the world of microservices, please, because that's a huge problem. That's putting fire on fire. Just let's try to standardize. Let's try to find a minimum common denominator that we can use to evolve this broken concept, right? But every organization, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately very loud, spend way too much time around those concepts, and yeah, they get trapped. And I use another example that you and I saw in the past. Like microservices is one side of the equation, and then you have a micro front end in the other edge that is following the same path. And we create fictional needs for that most of the time. But then you go into the world of Kubernetes and the world of Docker and the world of DevOps. So the reality of the facts is that we are still discussing in 2023. Let me check the calendar. 2023 is the year. Second half of 2023, we're still discussing on how to build a Kubernetes cluster. I thought we should not even discuss about it, or how to log, how to do logging. That's another huge topic, right? And the solution is already there. So that's where I say, going back to our original point, the tools versus platform versus product. I think they are not a versus. It's like a natural thing. You acquire tools to build a platform, the packs, to build your final product. But the final product is catered around your customers, is what your customer really want.
Yeah.
And that's the bespoke experience that you want to let them feel, right?
Love it. Love it. I loved it how you brought it together. And unfortunately, but we're also coming up on our time of the conversation today. I see many happening. But let's pull back onto your entrepreneurial hat.
Yeah.
And I'd want you to, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs or even developers who are passionately wanting to build or transform the backend experience? So any piece of advice for them?
Yeah, use Platformatic. That's my first one.
Love it.
No,
Perfect.
seriously. No, seriously.
Shameless plug-in. Yes, good.
No,
Check.
I'm actually serious. When we started Platformatic, I actually said this thing to Matteo, and he will listen to this podcast, so he will probably smile. I said, Platformatic, I need it just because I need to build new things fast. And that was the whole thing. So to entrepreneur, I always say a few things. The first one is, don't try to build something that competes. Build something that can evolve. Easier to sell, easier to get acquired, easy to get invested. But don't try to build. Pick one direction. So it's either business to consumer or business to business. Both very hard to cooperate. And my deepest recommendation is always to not only build something that is based on your experience, but make it yours. You need to live and breathe what you're building. You need to feel the pain to solve the problem in a meaningful way. And I see a lot of people that they come with ideas that they look great on paper, but they lose on the empathy, they lose on the connection between entrepreneur and product. And the other one, and I hope that our investors are not listening to the podcast. No, I'm joking. The other one is that I see a lot of people that they go into this, let's bootstrap, let's resist to the urge of go to VCs. But I personally feel that it's something that should change in the industry of startups and entrepreneur, because VCs are actually there to invest, but also to help. And that's the biggest thing. And they have this such a broad experience and deep seeing on failure that can always help you. And last but not least, and this is a suggestion for all the CEOs out there. Platformatic is my 5th company. I sold 3, closed 1, and Platformatic is the 5th. So I have 3 exits on the back of my shoulders. Very big exit. The last one was extremely big. I always connect with other CEOs, other industry leaders. And every time that I connect with them, I get 10x more energized and more inspired. And I take notes and I really think on their point of view. Because the most important thing is you need to be arrogant. The recipe, that's a kitchen analogy. The recipe is like ketchup paper, very simple, right? You need to be arrogant to be determined. And that's the only way I can push you like a rhino through every sort of difficulties. You need to be a visionary. You need to see through. You need to go beyond what the status quo is. And the third one is the opposite of the first. You need to be humble and receptive, because this is a cycle, right? It's a cycle. You cannot actually navigate the darkness without listening to the whisper of people that already walk there and tell you where to go. To solve a maze, you need to listen to other people that try to go through it and start to find new paths to go faster across the challenges of the maze. So this is like my recipe. I think the last point is the most important. There is so much value in listening to other CEOs and entrepreneurs that is probably what makes being an entrepreneur the most beautiful thing that you can experience.
Love that. Love that. Very well said, Luca. I think thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure people want to connect with you. So what would you suggest? What's the best platform to reach out to if they need to?
Anywhere from the Platformatic channels, our Discord. I'm Luca Maraschi everywhere. LinkedIn, it's becoming my new home. And that's probably the downside of being a CEO. But Twitter, Instagram, basically everywhere. And what I want to actually encourage everyone is to reach out, not with the fear that I'm gonna sell you Platformatic. I love actually to help people and give my point of views. So for anybody that has questions or wants to bounce ideas, I'm more than happy to be available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can vouch for that. Just reach out to Luca. He's always there for a good conversation. Luca, as always, grateful for you making the time for us and for a very insightful conversation.
Love to be here. And I thank you guys for having me. And it's always a pleasure to have a chat with you, Mudassar.
Absolutely, man. Until next time, man. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Ciao.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts specializing in designing experiences, building products, and scaling technology. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.